Good morning, and thanks for spending time with us as the very last slot of the conference. I know it's been a very busy set of days, so we appreciate you spending time with us here. My name is Jose Rodriguez. I lead the architecture team on the IBM practice in IBM. And joining me today is Shane Whedon. He is one of our architects focused on strong authentication and phishing-resistant authentication technologies. And he's also been very instrumental in the deployment of passkeys in IBM. So what we want to do today is, first of all, we want to give you a short update in terms of some of the recent trends that we're seeing on identity-based attacks and how those trends are influencing our movement towards adopting phishing-resistant authentication technology in our enterprise. And we also want to share some of our findings as we have gone through this journey. Our goal is that at the end of this session, you leave with a perspective on how to go about implementing passkeys on your organization. And also we'll share some of the lessons learned and some of the challenges that we face as we were trying to advocate for this technology to be adopted at IBM. Like any large organization, you have to sort of advocate for things to evolve, and we face the same challenges that any large organization will face. But the way we went about this was to try to use data in order to make our case. And one of the things that we started doing is looking at what the trends were in terms of identity-based attacks. And what we found is that identity is under a constant attack, and we found that phishing and the use of stolen and compromised credentials was a very popular way of attacking identity systems. We found that hackers are no longer trying to break into a system. What we're doing is they're using valid credentials and just flatly logging in. And we also found that there was a trend that made us very nervous, and that trend was that a lot of the recent attacks were specifically targeting high-level executives on Fortune 500 companies, just like IBM, and that the attacks that were being perpetrated, MFA or other forms of passwordless authentication that are not phishing-resistant, don't provide any mitigation. So obviously, this is something we needed to act upon, and so we started our journey to try to evangelize to be able to adopt phishing-resistant technology in IBM. And one of the things that we did is we tried to look for other data that supported our case. And IBM does quite a bit of threat intelligence reports. We publish a few reports every year. And one of the reports that we publish is something where we look at the cause of a data breach. And as a result of that, we came up with this diagram that is being displayed right now. And the way to read this diagram is you have to look at the x-axis represents how often a particular type of attack is used as the initial attack vector to do a data breach. The y-axis represents the cost associated with that attack. So as you can see, phishing and stolen or compromised credentials are the most frequently used type of attack to achieve a data breach. And they're also near the top in terms of cost. So one way to look at this is not the magic quadrant that you want to be a part of. The other data that we use to support our, to be able to influence the organization is we also do a lot of threat landscape investigation. And with that, we found that there was a significant increase in the amount of attacks that were based on valid accounts. And we saw that when our ethical team was involved helping customers to be able to mitigate some of the attacks that they were subject to, we found that a large percentage of those attacks, either in Europe, worldwide, or even in North America, there was a high percentage of those that were initiated using compromised credentials. So obviously, the decision was pretty much made by the data. We started our journey to adopt passkeys as a mechanism to authenticate. But before we go into Shane telling us all the different steps that we took towards that journey, we want to give you a perspective in terms of how our organization has been evolving their IAM deployment and how that evolution has helped us to be able to be at a position where we can adopt newer authentication technologies without a whole lot of friction. This journey is not unique to IBM. It's going to look very similar. Some of you are going to be in different stages of this. But we just want to kind of give you a view of what we went through and how it's now helping us to adopt passkeys. First of all, we didn't have a single source of truth for passwords. There were passwords everywhere on the different applications. And this was extremely challenging because it did not provide the type of governance that you want to have around credentials. So we created a single source of truth in terms of, and this happens way years ago, where a single credential was used to all the applications, but we did not have an enterprise single sign-on solution in place. So every application was presenting their own prompt, which makes it very difficult for somebody to discern if a particular prompt is legit or is something malicious. So we quickly evolved into using our technology to have an enterprise single sign-on solution. With that came a common experience for authentication and a common session. But we also had challenges with this approach where we had very ad hoc patterns for integrations with the platform, which made application onboarding very difficult and costly. This is where we are today. It's a much more scalable deployment of our IAM solution. We're leveraging our identity as a service solution that we offer our customers, but this could be any technology that you might have in your deployment. The key pieces of this is that we came up with a very finite set of integration patterns that we force applications to choose from. And we also automated the application onboarding, so our IT administrative organization is no longer bothered or burdened by having to help teams integrate into the system because it's very self-service and very quickly to be able to achieve. So what that's allowed us to do is to concentrate all our efforts in improving the security posture and the experience that our customers or our employees go through as they're authenticating into the applications in the enterprise. And with that, I turn it out to Shane so he can continue with our journey.
Thanks, Jose. So now that Jose sort of set the business context and the history of intranet login and IBM, I want to focus on what we've done with passkeys, right? Because that's what's near and dear to my heart. And I want to kick it off with a demo. So this is a live demo. I've set up this browser with a link to ibm.box.com/somedocument. This is one of our SaaS providers. You guys will all have SaaS providers that do different things for you. This is my login experience every day. Okay, so just watch and follow along. When I go to my SaaS provider, if I don't yet have a session, I am asked to authenticate. In this case, they're asking me to redirect to my corporate IDP because of the tenant URL. I redirect to my corporate IDP. It knows I use a passkey. I do Touch ID on my Mac. I'm logged in and I single sign on. There is a step here. You'll see this verifying step. I'm going to talk about that in a moment, where some risk evaluation is done. And I'm single sign on to my document, okay? And this is today's presentation. So that was a live demo of exactly how I log into work every day. The gesture is Touch ID on my Mac. That is the passkeys gesture for Apple iCloud keychain passkeys on your Mac. And that's the experience we want everyone to have. So whilst we're adopting it in a lot of cases for business risk, end users couldn't give a shit about business risk, all right? They care about their experience, making it fast and seamless. And that's the experience that I use, and that's the one that I promote internally in our company. Okay, so we did that. A little bit of drinking from the fire hose in terms of some stats here. So we have about 370,000 employee accounts in our directory, of which the majority of those log in nearly every day, and about 14% or so end up going through a two-factor flow after our risk decision. So we have what we call conditional MFA, right? You do some form of first-factor authentication. We do some risk evaluation, which is based on our own AI technology that we use for fraud detection, and then you are either allowed to proceed through without additional challenge. You might be denied if you say you're coming from an embargoed country, or you might be challenged for second factor authentication. So at the moment we get about 14% of first factor authentications resulting in second factor authentication. What you don't see here also is that the failure rate for password login as a first factor is about 7%, even filtering out bad actors. That tells me that there's quite a lot of people that don't even use a password manager because they're finger fudging that password. So that's terrible, okay? And the other number here that I hope you're looking at that's totally terrible is that number. And that's the problem we're trying to face. Now, we've done some things in our authentication environment that amplify the problem that we are going to address. I'll explain what they are. When you first rock up at our login page, you're given a choice of 3 different types of first factor authentication mechanisms. One of them is a password, one of them is a QR code-based login that is phishable, and the other one is passkeys. And once you select one, we set a persistent cookie that remembers that that's your preferred mechanism. So to actually switch from one mechanism to another requires you to go through a choose another way kind of experience. And so for those folks who end up selecting password first, a lot of them never even know about the fact that something better is available. And that's so some of the things that you'll see that are in our roadmap for what we're going to do with passkey onboarding is to address that particular problem there, right? We first introduced passkeys in 2020. It was a soft launch. We didn't talk about it too much. And, it had very low adoption. And some things have occurred over the passkey ecosystem in the last few years that have caused us to go forward, back, and now hopefully forward again. And I want to share what some of those things are with you. So this was our policy, right? When we first introduced this system, all passkeys were considered MFA complete. The risk engine basically only got consulted for things like, embargoed country, geolocation, and things of that nature. But you were never challenged for a second factor if you used a passkey. And then Apple came along and introduced synchronized passkeys, and our BSO shat the bed. Like, honestly, they just said, what's going on here? Our threat model is extended to a third party that's not in our control. What do we do? And I don't know if you went to Dean Sachs's threat model 2.0 presentation on passkeys yesterday, but our company had that kind of reaction. So we locked it down to only permit what we could attest as device-bound passkeys. And that abandoned quite a few people who had registered and now couldn't log in anymore. It was really rocky road for us. And all the Windows guys were kind of okay because Microsoft was very slow out of the gate and still are and haven't released synchronized passkeys yet. That turned out to be a bit of an advantage for the folks who are on Windows because we allowed them to stay on board. But Mac users really, unless they were issued with a hardware security key, of which we have only issued hardware security keys to a very small percentage of our employees, there is no way we're going to issue them for cost and distribution reasons to all employees. Unless you were using a hardware security key on Mac, you're in a bit of strife, right? So all of these things were causing us to miss out on the benefits of phishing-resistant authentication. And a lot of what the Netflix team said yesterday in their presentation resonated with me when I had a look at that for the exact same reason here. So this is what we've done. This is what's new. We now accept all passkeys regardless of who the provider is. And you're allowed to log in with them as first factor. In fact, I had a look this morning and we have over 50 unique AA GUIDs registered in terms of the authenticator landscape. Now, some of these might be from a hardware security key an employee picked up at a conference just like this. Some of them might be because they have their own password manager already, or they were already a hardware security key owner. Right? And there's a lot of different flavors of some passkeys from some vendors too. So even in our own enterprise deployment, where we did a limited deployment of YubiKeys, there's 6 or 7 different models, and they of course have different AA GUIDs. So, but there were some surprising ones, right? There's even without announcing it, about 60 people have registered Bitwarden passkeys. We don't even tell people about Bitwarden. That's just their own password manager that they're using. That's pretty cool, right? We do have an arrangement. Our logo's on 1Password's website, so 1Password is an enterprise password manager provider to us. And I would say at the moment we probably have about 1,500  1Password registered passkeys without even having advertised it to the masses, okay? So what we've done is we just said, come one, come all. And the reason for that is to mitigate the risk of phishing, okay, against employees. We accept them all, and then we perform a risk decision to decide what happens next. So I did cover some of these stats. What we've noticed is, just in terms of platform versus roaming authenticators, 85% of all registrations are platform authenticators. That includes, and I'd say more than half of them would be Windows Hello, and the rest would be a combination of Apple iCloud Keychain and Google Password Manager. And our password manager providers, including 1Password, Bitwarden and others. If you want to see that as an algorithm, this is what it looks like. Someone logs in, we decide what happens next. There are 3 branches: goodbye, welcome, or we would like a higher assurance. Okay, and that's a very, very simple flowchart of how risk management works. Yeah.
What would that higher assurance be?
There can be. So I'm going to get to what the higher assurance is. Actually, higher assurance is probably the wrong terminology. Another form of second-factor authentication is the right way to do that. And besides the things that I talked about here, the risk signals that go into that triangle aren't just geolocation. We have behavioural biometrics, time of day sort of patterns for a user. If I go and log in on Jose's computer, I'm definitely going to get a challenge. We still actually allow some attested authenticators to come in straight away because of their attestation. We know they have quite high assurance, so you'd had to have had the authenticator and the ability to do user verification to it. But for the most part, our risk engine's pretty good at deciding when to perform an additional authentication challenge. So we do prompt for an additional existing multi-factor mechanism. Primarily that will be TOTP, but we have a mobile push solution as well, or it can be another passkey, as long as it's not the one you just use for first factor. All right, so simple stuff. So these are things we're looking at in the near term, probably before we do a major launch. Where we're at in our push is we've started to invite cohorts of adopters around about 300-400 at a time, sort of director level in all their reports, including our own team. And I know my director is hot on the heels of anyone who hasn't followed up on it yet. So that's sort of our approach. We're rolling it out in phases, getting feedback, tuning our documentation a little bit, and then iterating further out. One of our major goals here is to just get rid of SMS OTP, both for cost and security reasons. It's just terrible. Right? It's just terrible. We're doing quite a bit of work on tighter integration between our MDM environments and our access management system. So we have some coverage there already, but it doesn't cover all managed devices. And that's going to help a lot because that'll be a key ingredient into our risk engine, right? If we can see that someone's using an unattested passkey from a managed device that is compliant and was issued to the same dude, chances are that we won't have to do a conditional second factor prompt for that guy. So that's a key ingredient before we really scale this out to the full 370,000 people. So let's just move on here a bit. I've got 2 slides left, and this is probably the stuff that if I was sitting in your seat, I'd be waiting for. This is what our advice is and our findings. So first of all, the reason we decided to accept all passkeys, regardless of their provenance, is that we wanted to address the major threats that Jose talked about in the business problem, in particular phishing. The phishing as a service tools available to bad actors today are just too easy, and social engineering against C-suite executives is too attractive, and it continues to be a problem. So we needed to do that, and only by just accepting the reality of where we were with respect to how people were logging in and what we could actually provision them with and what they already had. Only by accepting that reality could we make the step to say that accepting any passkey is better than accepting only a subset of passkeys. And this goes to that point, right? The predominantly available passkeys in everyone's hands are those from the platform, and the big cohort that was missing out on in our environment was people on Macs. And we have a large deployment. I think we have the largest enterprise deployment of Macs in the world, outside of, obviously, Apple. we also need to be able to deal for some environments that have high assurance scenarios. So that's one nice thing about our risk engine is we can do that, right? We can do things like, okay, you might have logged in with an unattested passkey, but you're going to manage a FedRAMP environment and that's no good. You were given a YubiKey, use the bloody thing. You know, we can do things like that. And the employees should know better. You can crack the whip on them a little bit. Okay, education. I've seen this in all the slides about deploying passkeys now. It's critical. So I actually did a bit of cheating earlier on, and I pulled up a couple of pages here. So this is like a portal that people get invited to go and have a read of when they get introduced to passkeys. We have a little bit about the why, but we also do quite a bit of stuff. So we have recommended recipes based on what operating system and passkey provider you might want to use. And we talk about alternatives. That doesn't mean other things won't work. They're just not the ones that we're encouraging people to use. Right? A lot of people coming at this aren't going to know what to do. So we want to give them something. And we want to have a set that we can support. There was another presentation earlier this week about the compound expression of the types of authenticators or passkey providers, operating systems and browsers, and it's in the many, many thousands. So we're not going to document all that. We're going to document what we encourage people to use for their operating system, and if they're creative enough that they understand this tech, which will happen over time, right? None of us knew what Bluetooth was when it first came out either. It will happen over time. Then they can use their own. This is an example of one of the drill downs. We have a demo video of how to set it up and step-by-step instructions, right? So we've gone to a fair bit of trouble to make the user education fairly detailed. We also have, besides our help desk, self-help and peer-to-peer help on Slack. And that's something that you get when you get your introduction to faster, more secure authentication at IBM, you get introduced to this channel as well. We do the same for other tools like our Watson Code Assistant, which a lot of developers are going through at the moment for AI-generated code. So this is a tool that people are familiar with and can go and get help and discuss things with the community. We're going to use nudge theory. So this is what my animation here, or my pictograph here is all about. Mostly we want people to adopt this because it's fast, like what you saw when I logged in. Right? We want them to adopt it for that reason. That's the carrot, right? We are going to do some stuff on the stick side as well to make passwords less attractive than they already are. So, and some of these are actually probably likely to be in contradiction with the latest NIST recommendations. So we are going to continue to expire passwords on a schedule. It's inconvenient, stiff, and when you go to reset your password, you'll be re-invited back into the passkey ecosystem where you'll be told you don't have to do this again. We're also going to look at the idea of requiring MFA every time you use a password, regardless of if you're on a managed device or not. Higher friction, use a passkey, goes away. Right? So this is nudge theory, and if you haven't heard of that, look it up. There's some pretty cool real-world examples of how nudge theory works. And this is my final one. We have interfaces today that are not WebAuthn ready. Netflix guys said exactly the same thing. Slightly different examples. For us, the thick client for Microsoft Outlook on the Mac, when you log into it, opens a web widget. WebAuthn doesn't work there. Right? So we have two other forms of first-factor authentication in our org, and they do work there. One is a password, another is a QR code scan. And we know we're going to have to keep them around for a while. So remember this. If, like us, you're going to have some interfaces that are going to require a password for some time to come, then why wouldn't you accept unattested passkeys? Don't ask why you should, ask why you wouldn't. Because whilst some of those interfaces still require a password, they're not the remotely scalable attack vectors, okay? They're not. The remotely scalable attack vectors are those that are socially engineered. I get an email, I click on a link, I end up at a phishing site. That's browser channel. That's the browser channel, not the thick clients where WebAuthn doesn't work. So that's a very small percentage of use cases that we have to keep a passkey hanging around for. A password hanging around for. But the vast majority of remotely scalable attacks come through the browser-based channel. And that's what we're trying to protect. That's the really key message here. So I've said it twice already. This is my final message. Don't ask why you would introduce unattested passkeys to your org. Ask why you wouldn't. Thanks very much.
So do all the laptops in IBM have like a device certificate? Does it reduce I guess I'm a believer, but I'm just trying to understand.
Okay, so I'll just repeat the question. Do all our devices in IBM have under MDM? Let's just go with that for a start. No, we have a BYOD policy for some. There's some apps that you can't use on a BYOD, but we have a BYOD policy. Our company wants us to have Slack on our non-managed phones so that we do work on the weekends. Yeah? Yes, there are some things you can do from a personal laptop, right? And that's another reason why MDM isn't going to cover this everywhere. Yeah. At the back.
What's your recovery flow if the user enrolled with a personal device, personal password manager, and then is not able to redeem those?
Yeah, so the account recovery flow is interesting. At the moment, we have an account recovery flow already that requires intervention from a person. So it is going to because it's an enterprise. It's actually easier to solve than a consumer use case. We can use the employee-manager relationship in that. So we actually have a Slack bot that allows a manager to reset an employee's MFA completely. Right, and then they can use a password reset flow. It can go to the manager, and they can rebootstrap that way. And the manager should sit down and have a good conversation with them about interrupting their day. Does that cover your question? Yeah. It is. It's an existing process, right? Yeah.
So in other words, if there's a way to revoke passkeys, people leave the company.
Yeah, our offboarding process is much more sophisticated than that. Okay. Yeah. It's not just revoking passkeys. Your whole account gets disabled.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, what if someone changes jobs?
Job roles are like any other IGA scenario. There'll be a feed that, changes what groups they're in, but their account remains the same. Sorry, over here.
I'm curious about your hourly workforce and how you're managing your conditional access.
Did you say hourly workforce?
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
It's a workforce that potentially can't follow a bring your own device model that you might not issue.
So I'll give you an example where you can't do BYOD. Like if you're working on any of our federal systems, then things are much tighter. And we absolutely have controls in our platform that allow us to say, if you're going to these apps, this is the only way you can log in, and it has to be on a managed device with your corporate issued YubiKey and all that sort of stuff. So we have the flexibility to introduce per application or per environment style access policies to deal with regulatory and other strong authentication requirements. Yeah, in the middle here. Yeah. A phishable one. Yeah, I want to address that because it was in my speaker notes, which I didn't refer to at all. And that is, I had a conversation with our BISO about just letting unattested passkeys come in and then not challenging for second factor. And they said, oh, no, we can't do that. I said, okay, I've got an Apple iCloud keychain passkey. It's managed in Apple's password manager. My TOTP secret is right there alongside it. So if someone takes over my Apple account, they use my passkey for first factor. Yep, our risk engine will say, you need to do second factor. They got my TOTP because that's in the same password manager. He's like, I don't care. I said, okay, I accept your ridiculous opinion. But if that is the barrier, if that is the price I have to pay to get passkeys in the door, let's shake hands and move on. And that's exactly pretty much what happened. So I will accept that other people, risk managers, have a different perspective on this than I do as a security guy and reach a compromise. And I actually expect that our risk engine will get good enough over time and be fed with new signals as well, particularly new MDM signals or new passkey provider signals that will reduce that 14.5% of second factor challenges that we see today with low assurance first factor credentials. No, on a low assurance first factor, which is either an unattested passkey, QR login, or password. Yeah. Sorry, this gentleman here.
In the enrollment process, when do you allow users to create a passkey? I assume that they will use application at the multiple personal devices, and I guess at some point when they log in, you allow them to create a passkey. So I assume they will have multiple passkey. Does it raise any concern with anyone from your CISO, for example, because user right now have a lot of...
We encourage people to register as many passkeys as they want against an account, right? We have a user self-care page where they can do that. Today we aren't doing solicited passkey registration, but if you were looking at my roadmap slide, we are planning to do that down the road a little bit. We just want a higher cohort of initial adopters introduced first before we interrupt the login flow and say, please do this. There's two things happening with respect to enrollment. One is solicited passkey registration is in the pipeline, and the other is birthright access. So we're actually working on how we onboard new employees and making sure they get provision with a passkey first and in preference to a password. Yeah.
More if I could. So, does passkeys have the same limitations on remote sessions like through RDP, like where you have to manually type a password or YubiKey might not be passed through? Passkeys?
So I haven't had to deal with a lot of RDP-based users. I know that there are, with a full Microsoft environment, you can pass through USB. All I can really say about that is there are going to be scenarios where passkeys don't work, right? And we have an alternative, even if we don't like it. And what we hope is that the channels where those non-passkey based experiences reside are not those that are remotely scalable by bad actors. So they're lower risk in that regard, simply because it is less likely that a bad actor is going to set up a phishing site for RDP than it is just for the basic web login. Yeah.
Do you view like a wallet solution, like you mentioned one password there, that's basically device agnostic and sending out passkeys, something you can leverage in the future to accelerate your deployment and usage and utilization of passkeys?
Well, I think synced passkeys allow us to do quite a few things, just more generally, rather than, the term wallet is typically used in verifiable credential style scenarios, but if I don't see password managers venturing into wallet providers, I'll be very surprised. I'll tell you what I really hope to see accelerate it. I hope to see the operating system vendors provide credential manager experiences that are centrally orchestrated on laptops like they do on mobiles today. So one of the things I don't like about my 1Password experience on my Mac is that I have to have a browser plugin and it intercepts all WebAuthn calls. I hate that. I tell Nick that all the time. I hate that thing. Yeah, right. But they're somewhat constrained on the laptops simply because there's no plug-in interface for credential providers like there is on iPhone and Android. And so that's what I hope to see happen, and I think that will help the ecosystem a lot. Yeah. Sorry, Ian.
You mentioned that every talk you saw emphasized the need for user education, and the screenshots you showed seemed like the best and most robust user education I've seen so far.
Yeah.
Any chance some of that can be published and potentially reused by other enterprises that are trying to educate?
I don't own it, but I'll take the message back, and we can compare some notes. Yeah. We have, amazingly for an IT company, and I don't think it's that amazing, we have a lot of really dumb people work in our organization. It continues to blow my mind how unsophisticated some of our salespeople are. Right? And so historically, we've had to provide very detailed education. And, we have a constituency that's very quick to throw darts at things. Does this resonate with any other enterprises out there? I mean, this is just what it's like, right? So I kind of feel like, honestly, it should be self-discoverable, a lot of this stuff. And I've been encouraging the people who publish that information to, just provide some guidelines. But they're like, no, it won't work. And they're right, because I've seen some of the questions in our Slack channel. I'm like, you can't be serious, right? So I just choose not to answer them at the risk of getting blacklisted from it. Yeah. Guys, I think we're just about out of time, but thank you so much for coming along. I hope you got something out of it.